Good evening, Taos, and good evening, everyone who's watching this forum tonight. I'm Darien Fernandez, Taos County Democratic Party Chair, and we are live with the two candidates for the 8th Judicial District Attorney position. And this does not have a Republican opponent in the fall, so the primary on June 2nd will decide who will serve as the DA for the next 4 years for District 8, which is Taos, Union, and Colfax counties. I have with us tonight the District Attorney, Marcus Montoya, who was appointed by Michelle Lujan Grisham, and his challenger for this race, Mr. Paul Sanchez.
Hi.
And hey, so we will have opening statements at 2 minutes each. And Mr. Montoya, you may go first.
Okay, thank you, County Chair Fernandez, and thank you to the Taos County Democratic Party for putting this together and allowing us to meet with our voters and constituents. I'd like to say hi to my mom and dad, Mark and Maxine Montoya. A little background on me is I was born and raised here in Taos. I grew up in Raton for a couple of years there in 4th and 5th grade. Played some Little League, around the district in Clayton and Cimarron. I started representing this community, in school and in high school. I was a Gold Cord recipient. I was a state wrestling champion, an all-state baseball player. And then I went on to Beloit College. That's in Wisconsin. And I was a baseball college player there and a 3-time all-conference baseball player. And recently actually inducted into the Beloit College's Athletic Hall of Honor. Since then, upon graduation, I returned here to Taos, working for the family business, my dad's business, Prime Pest Control, and some other jobs here and there. I was also the head baseball coach here for over a decade. It was fun being able to win, multiple district championships, but mostly being able to build lifelong relationships with my athletes, my coaches, the administrators, and all the parents. After that, the next chapter of my life was going to UNM School of Law, where, I forged hundreds of wonderful friendships and professional relationships with my classmates, some who are now elected state legislators. One in particular, U.S. Representative Xochitl Torres Small, and other professors who have proven invaluable resources in my capacity as your district attorney. I now hope to continue representing your community the best as I can as your district attorney, and I want to thank everybody for joining us here tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you, Darien. And hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here tonight, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak at this forum. I grew up in Taos County. I was born and raised in Taos County, grew up in Arroyo Hondo, and graduated from Taos High School in 1986. Now, after high school, that's when I began my service in public safety and public service. I went to the Marine Corps. I was a Marine for the 4-year service. And after that, I became a state police officer, where I climbed the ranks from patrolman to lieutenant and supervised many officers and civilian staff. I served 18 years with the state police. Then I went to law school in San Antonio, Texas, St. Mary's School of Law, 2005, graduated in 2008. I became a prosecutor and have been prosecuting cases for 10 plus years. And that experience brings leadership and prosecuting murder cases and successfully getting convictions. Now, what that tells you is that my life after high school has been public service. I'm a servant to the community. I'm a servant to the people around me. I always have been, and I always will. Thank you.
Right. So, Paul, Mr. Sanchez, Mr. Marcus Montoya, do you mind if I just use first names tonight?
That's fine with me.
That's fine with me, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Paul, in your mind, in 1 minute to answer, what are the qualities that make a good district attorney? And why do you feel that you fit those qualities?
Well, I think first of all, you need experience and you need proven leadership. I mean, when you lead an office like a district attorney, it's not an office that you can do by yourself. So you have to be able to lead a team of prosecutors, a team of civilian staff, and that only comes with experience. And that's not something that you get overnight. One thing in my experience in being a chief deputy district attorney here in the 8th Judicial District where I was raised, I was able to do a lot of observation. I saw a lot of disconnect with law enforcement. I saw attorneys that weren't focused on building strong cases. So I think what the district attorney's office is charged with is building those strong cases, building an alliance with law enforcement, and getting strong cases right from the start. So you're not forced into weak plea offers, and you can represent the public in public safety in general.
Okay, thank you. Marcus, same question.
Thank you for the question, Chair Fernandez. My statement would be that it's a matter of leadership. Are you able to lead those, lead the office? You know, here in this district, we have 9 attorneys, we have 30 staff members, and leadership isn't about title. It's not about status. It's not about wielding power, right? It's not about pretending to have the right answers. Leaders got to stay curious. We've got to ask the right questions, and we got to be willing to engage in the difficult conversations. That's what we've done in the last 10 months. We've have been trial ready, you know, over the last 10 months since August 1st. Our office has filed 24 pretrial detention motions, which keeps people in jail until trial. And we've been successful on 21 of those things. That's almost 88%. The state average is 60%. And so that's been a drastic change. And so when we speak about trial preparation, trial ready, having strong cases so you don't have to give away weak pleas, that's exactly what we've done. And so we've had those conversations with law enforcement, with our victims. And so it's a matter of being able to build a consensus, build those lines of communication, and really lock down your case early on, because we work hand in hand.
Okay, thank you. So Marcus, I think you both have mentioned the importance of building strong relationships with local law enforcement. What is the position of the district attorney if local law enforcement, let's say on the issue of gun rights in sanctuary cities, are choosing not to uphold the red flag legislation that was enacted in the legislature a year ago?
Good question, Darien. There's a lot of moving parts to that question. And fortunately, not to speak about other jurisdictions, but our jurisdiction is speaking with our sheriffs and with our chiefs, is we are ready to prosecute and handle those petitions, right? It's a lot of moving parts, and that red flag law is a step in the right direction, right? Ultimately, what do we want? We don't want certain guns out of everybody's hands. We want all guns out of certain people's hands. And so this is a step in the right direction. Legislatively, there's going to be some obstacles and hurdles to overcome, but we will be enforcing that law, and we will be sure to observe due process, right? It's not just the reporting parties that we need to protect. It's also the respondents, those who the petitions are filed against, to make sure that they are afforded a fair hearing, to be heard on the merits before taking their guns away. So I am happy to report that this district is prepared for the red flag law, which goes into effect May 20th.
Thank you. Paul, same question.
Thank you, Darien. I think my answer will be pretty shortcut and straightforward. When you're talking about the office of the district attorney and the district attorney himself, you're talking about a person who has taken an oath to defend the law. So my answer is simple. You follow the law. Whatever the legislatures have passed, you follow that law. We can't pick and choose which laws we're going to obey and which ones we're not going to obey, as we have to elect strong leaders and pretty simply, we will follow the law, and a district attorney should follow the law. When you're talking about the red flag laws, gun laws, fortunately, we have a system of government where the attorney general sits up there to enforce those types of things. But as far as the district attorney, you follow the law.
Okay. Paul, what's your view on working with immigrations and customs enforcement in this area, given that both Taos Town and Taos County have sanctuary city resolutions?
Well, when you're talking about immigration, as I mentioned before, you have to follow the law. You've taken an oath, and whenever you're talking about an elected position, you want to leave the community assured that you're not just going to be picking and choosing. So when it comes to immigration, and I haven't really seen any immigration people in our district. And as far as creating sanctuary cities, if that's the law, then that's the law that the district attorney has taken an oath to follow.
Okay, Marcus.
Yes, thank you for that question, Chair Fernandez. I think Mr. Sanchez and I are in agreement that we're not beholden to town code or ordinances or counties. We got to enforce state laws, state statutes, and if immigration implications exist, it is our duty to follow up with that. Now, of course, you want to also be very considerate of your victims, your families, and take that into consideration when handling a lot of these immigration and visa issues. But that is a comprehensive view that this office takes and will continue to take.
Okay. So Marcus, when is it appropriate to prosecute to the fullest extent, and when is it appropriate to seek alternative sentencing or other diversionary programs?
Good question, Chair Fernandez. So there are a lot of moving parts in that question. So to answer them, it's always appropriate to prosecute to the fullest extent, right? You build your case strong, then you know what you're looking at as far as likely conviction. Once you have that idea of what you're going to likely convict on, that's when you enter into plea negotiations. Now, I think the system, right, we live now in a statewide and national climate of criminal reform, criminal justice reform, prison reform, sentencing reform. Even our president now has pardoned a lot of former convicts and commuted their sentences. Well, I think that's easy when we're talking about substance abuse disorder types of crimes, low level, repeat offender types of criminals. Now, those are the cases that are clearly appropriate for diversionary programs, right? And when you've got to the other end of the spectrum, your violent felons, those are the ones where you try to build a strong case so that way you can prosecute and ask for a sentence, because those are the people who need to be incapacitated, who need to be separated from the rest of society. And then you got the huge middle ground. And you want to, if they're rehabilitative, if we can have a hope for rehabilitation, then we consult with mental and behavioral health experts, and you look for diversionary programs that can treat them so that they become taxpayers and not tax takers, and you try to get early intervention. So these drug addicts and substance abuse disorder individuals, when they're committing a crime under the influence, they're not concerned about what's going to happen to them 9 months, 10 months, 18 months down the road. That's why you need to get them early intervention. We need to intervene in the first few weeks and find them resources and let the mental and behavioral health experts determine whether or not these people are or are not good candidates. So I could go on for another hour, but that's my answer in a nutshell, Chair.
Thank you. Paul.
Thank you, Darien. I believe that it's always appropriate to prosecute crime to the fullest extent. And what I've noticed in this district is that we need to build strong cases. We need to create that alliance with law enforcement and build strong cases. And that way you don't have plea offers forced on you. It's never appropriate to engage in plea offers, when you have that information, if you start the information, if you build the case strong, you gather a lot of information. You know what type of crime it is. You know how violent this person is. You know a background. In plain and simple, you take the victims into consideration and the potential for somebody to reoffend, depending on the crime. So you want to walk into court with a case that's going to stand up in court, want to go ready for a trial. And if plea negotiations engage, well, you enter those plea negotiations. I do agree with Mr. Montoya when we talk about alternative sentencing, especially when we're talking about our district, because we can't ignore it anymore. We have a drug trafficking problem. We have a problem with all the crimes that spawn from that. And with that comes property crimes and home invasions, stuff like that. But we have addicted people that do need help. And I'm with it on that. But as a district attorney, we work in an adversarial system in the United States. And so every defendant has an attorney. And if he can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed. So my position is this: the district attorney represents the people of this community. And before you enter into a plea negotiation or even alternative sentencing, you got to remember that you represent the people. So they need to benefit from any plea bargain. And it's ridiculous when you have a defendant being the only person that benefits from a plea offer. And that's when it's appropriate, when our community gets a win.
Okay. Paul, you've mentioned several times now the importance of building a strong relationship with law enforcement. Do you feel like there isn't a strong relationship right now?
Well, all you have to do is look at the cases. All you have to do is see what's happening in our district. We need to call a spade a spade. I'll say it that way. We're going into court with case files that aren't strong. And I know law enforcement is out there doing their job. I see them. I'm aware. I look into it, and I know that they're doing their job. And I know it takes time before the investigation's over, before it comes to trial, and our community's left with what happened to that case. So that in itself tells you there's no communication, or very, very little communication, because law enforcement is doing their job. So we need to build those cases strong. What I've done in the past, and after I left the 8th Judicial District, I went into private practice, became a contractor, where I was hired by a major police department and fire department. We need to train those officers. I was able to get my certification from the Law Enforcement Academy to train police officers. So we got to build these cases nice and strong early. And when we see plea bargains, or we see cases falling apart, that's when the investigative portion and prosecution isn't meeting in the middle.
Okay. Marcus, what's your take on it?
Thank you for that question, Chair Fernandez. Yeah, it's entirely about open and established protocols for line of communication with law enforcement. And that's what we've changed over the last 10 months. Again, I'm going to point to our 88% clip of holding defendants in jail pending trial. That is such a high burden. It draws on so many resources. Those cases have to be put together within 5 days, because upon arrest, upon first appearance, we're going to have a hearing in 5 days to see if they are dangerous. Well, we can't do that without working with law enforcement. Again, prior to August 1st, our percentage rate of granted petitions were statewide similar at 60%. We're at 88% now, 21 of 24. And so if that doesn't speak to exactly what we've been doing over the last 10 months, nothing does. And able to hold somebody in jail before they're convicted, pending trial, means that those cases are strong. We have gone to preliminary examination. And those are the substantial and concrete changes that this office has undergone in the last 10 months. And so it's very clear. And in the age of communication, as an example, you know, we were able to pick up a phone and call law enforcement. Pick up the phone, call your victim. Pick up the phone, call your witness. It's a direct protocol that we weren't utilizing across the board. Now it is exactly that. And so when aids of communication is so simple. Make a phone call, come into my office. Where does this case sit? Where are we strong? What do we need to work with? What's lacking? And those are all very intense preparation. Draws on a lot of resources, draws on a lot of time. 24 in the last 10 months. That's not an easy job because these hearings take preparation to completion 4 to 10 to 12 hours for one case, right? And so we're looking at roughly a week and 2 weeks of work put in by these attorneys with law enforcement. So to say, well, we're looking at cases and cases are falling apart, not true. Incredibly not true. And what we're doing is we're putting people in jail before they're even convicted. And if we were strong enough to do that, that should be an indicator and representative of the case we're going to take to trial, right? So again, clear lines of communication to strengthen your case, and that has been demonstrated for the last 10 months, and it's exactly what's going to move forward. Thank you, Chair.
What's the best way to approach some of these issues that are plaguing our community, like domestic violence, substance abuse and misuse, property crimes? The list can go on. Marcus.
Thank you for that question, Chair. It is drawing on other resources. We have got to think outside of the box. We have got to get progressive. We've got to get open-minded, right? This arrest, prosecute, and jail, that has done nothing for the last 100 years, has done nothing in this community. And so we got to draw on outside resources. And what does that mean? And what have I been doing? I've gone to our national delegation. I've spoken with our U.S. senators and our U.S. representatives and their chiefs of staffs in person in their office. What can we do to fund veterans courts? What can we do to fund wellness courts? We are on the cusp of implementing what's called law enforcement assisted diversion, so that suspects or defendants at scene are diverted away from arrest and given and taken directly to the resources. That way my office never even sees it. And it is these Department of Justice fundings and these grants and drawing and building a comprehensive community-wide support system for these repeat offenders, right? It's going and getting these monies from the feds that helps our community implement better and different measures. That's what I've been doing. I go to the state legislature and they were all in agreement at the Criminal Justice Reform Committee subhearing of we need treatment facilities for mental, substance, and behavioral health individuals, because those are the ones that clog up and congest our criminal justice system. And they were all in agreement. Now, if anyone's been paying attention to this pandemic and what it's done to our economy, it'd be naive to think we're going to be able to go over there and ask for 5, 10, 15, 20 million. But we are on the cusp since last September, law enforcement assisted diversion. We're looking and we are a front runner to obtain $1 million grant from the Department of Justice beginning in October. And it's been great collaboration with the defense bar, with the judges, with the sheriff, with the chief, with a lot of victim advocacy groups, with a lot of treatment facility and rehab centers. And that's what we've done in the last 10 months. And that's what I will continue to do. And that's how we address the larger picture, right? Where are we going to get these resources? Because we're not a rich community. We're in a bad shape fiscally with the entire state. You know, we're already being asked, you got to try to revert some money. How are you going to give back 10 to 20% of your fiscal year 21 budget? We were already underfunded. And that's not a cliche. And we've got to deal with red flag laws. We've got to deal with expungements. We've already been dealing with pretrial detention motions. And every attorney has 150 to 220 cases. We've got to do our regular jobs. So it's a matter of drawing on other resources, looking at other programs. What is working in other jurisdictions? And bring those programs here to Taos. Bring those programs to the 8th Judicial District. Bring them to our communities, right? And so the veterans courts, those are funded by the Department of Justice also. I was in those offices asking to please get that funded so that our state can request and appropriate that money so that we get something up here that has never happened. And those are the differences. That's the proactive approach to taking care of a long-standing problem in this community. So that's my answer. Thank you, Chair.
Paul.
Thank you, Darren. Well, I think it's about crime right here where we live. We can talk about getting money from this place and that place. We can talk about creating this law and that law to better help our community. but it requires feet on the pavement. Our people in the trenches, the way it's supposed to be, going out and dealing with the issues. We got issues with drug trafficking. We got an addicted community that has fallen victim to this drug trafficking. So, you know, we need to call, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, we need to call a spade a spade. We need to prosecute these crimes for what they are. I mean, when you talk about resources and treatment and money going here and money going there, well, it doesn't do you no good if you're not building the strong case. And I'll give you a couple of examples here. When you talk about a rape and you don't build a strong case, and you have a young person, an offender committing a crime like that, you don't build a strong case and you're forced into a plea offer, and you change the crime from rape to something else. Well, all this money that you're talking about, all these laws that you're talking about don't do you no good. We need to help not only the victims, but even young offenders to not offend again. We live in a system where when you call a spade, when you charge and you convict for the crime that they did, it allows our judicial system to bring in those types of resources. So, for example, a young man who may be in trouble for a sexual violence crime, if you leave it a sexual violence crime, guess what? The judge in our court system can now offer the type of treatment to help an individual who maybe have tendencies, violent sexual tendencies, to change that behavior so that he doesn't reoffend. So we need to prosecute the crimes that are in place. When you change crimes like child molestation to something other than child molestation, well, you're tying the court's hands behind their back, and all of the resources in the world isn't going to change it. We need to follow the laws that we have in place. We need to supervise people who are dangerous. And we can't be changing things around because no resource that we go after is going to help us if we're not going to prosecute the crime that was committed. Thank you, Darren.
I mean, granted, it does take money to run an operation like this. And we've seen school districts sue the state of New Mexico and win and establish a constitutional right for more funding. Paul, would you support the concept of DAs or district attorney or judicial districts approaching funding in a similar way by having to resort to suing the state for it?
Well, you know what? Whatever it takes for the security of our community to happen, whatever it takes for our people to feel safe where they live in this beautiful place that we have here, if that's what it takes to serve our community and bring a safe 8th Judicial District, I'm all for that.
Okay, Marcus?
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. Having presented to the Legislative Finance Committee, coming up on my second budget request, now having to deal with reverting money and this pandemic and our economic growth, it's very clear that doesn't benefit this office. This office is a state agency. So we've got to get a comprehensive look with our legislators, with our local community members, and with the stakeholders to determine how do we get that money. So I don't understand how the state agency is going to sue the state for money that is being requested through the state Legislative Finance Committee and Department of Finance Administration. So my suggestion is you build a consensus, you work year round, you never stop working to understand where to allocate this money, where is it most appropriate, and then you find a way to go get it.
Okay. Thank you. Our governor has called for legal recreational marijuana and has even recently stated that if it were legal here, it could have possibly helped offset some of the hole in the budget that's been caused because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Marcus, do you support the governor's position? And how would you see those additional revenues coming in and being used in a good way across the district?
Thank you, Chair. That's a good question. The nutshell is, yes, I support medical marijuana, but when we're going to move over to recreational legislation, we got to make sure that it doesn't interfere with patients' access, right? And so it's also necessary that we've got to use those monies so that way law enforcement can test for impairment, right? At a vehicle crash scene, if they're under the impairment of THC and we're able to determine that, it's a critical component to ensuring safety on our roads. Now, economically, yes, I'm always in favor of taxing, regulating, and legislating these types of programs. But we've got to make sure we do it responsibly. We got to be smart. We got to not rush into anything. And, most importantly, we got to set regulation that ensures that children don't have access to marijuana, right? So if we can address these public safety issues, if with the added revenue and from taxing with this industry, yeah, I think that our state can draft improved legislation when we do legalize it. And so do we legalize it with safe, appropriate measures going in? And the monies itself, right? Of course, the District Attorneys Association, and I personally, I'm going to request that money be spent for law enforcement, training, early intervention treatment, because it is a controlled substance. I mean, we've decriminalized it, right? But it does impair. And if people have a problem with it, if they've been involved in a criminal act because of it, then those resources should go directly to us. I know everyone's going to be pulling at that honeypot, but of course, that's the district attorney's position.
Thank you. Paul.
Thanks, Darien. Well, first of all, when you're talking about recreational marijuana and anything like that, I'm concerned about our young people. I'm concerned about the propensities that happen when you start playing with things like this. I mean, we already have issues in our district. We've already talking about addiction and everything else. So I'm concerned about our young people. I know we want to find funds for different types of things, but my priority is the young people of this district, our children. How do we protect them when you legalize marijuana, recreational marijuana? I don't have the answer, and I haven't heard an answer that would satisfy me to push towards a world where recreational marijuana is just blatantly out there. That's my answer.
So one of our former governors, Gary Johnson, has called for the legalization of all drugs and stated that the war on drugs, which we've waged for about 50 years now, has been a failure. Do you feel it's been a failure? Do you feel like we should continue that? Do you feel like resources should be better spent on treatment and prevention? What are your thoughts, Paul?
Well, as far as the war on drugs, I firmly believe that it's not, we haven't won it, but you don't give it up. The war on drugs, or whatever they want to call it, we're talking about the future that we want to leave for our kids. The community that we've built, at least speaking for the 8th Judicial District, when you panic and you think that everything is lost, you don't open the floodgates and just let it be destroyed. So while the war on drug is still out there, it's still being fought, it's worth fighting that fight.
Okay. Marcus.
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. So ideally, right, you look at Portugal who's gone all the way to the left, saying let's legalize, decriminalize, and is that working? Would that work for us? Now, my stance is when you legalize and people who do become addicted, that is not a victimless crime. I've had parents, I've had spouses, I've had children come into my office and say, please put this person in jail because they're terrorizing the family unit, right? And so no, we can't just legalize everything. We've got to do this smart. We got to legislate. We got to regulate. We got to have a plan moving forward. As the chief law enforcement officer and charged with public safety, protecting this community, we need to make sure that any legislation we move forward for decriminalizing or legalizing has got to be well thought out. It's got to be argued. It's got to be, we want to have a model for those other jurisdictions or even countries that are utilizing these steps to determine the cost-benefit analysis, right? Because we can't be so naive to think that we're winning this war on drugs, because we're not. Anyone with an objective view sees that we're not. And so is it a big launch to think that we could do that? No, it's not, but it's going to take time. You don't just wave a magic wand and we've legalized everything and all addiction and all addiction related crimes are going to disappear, right? So we do need to be forward thinking. We do need to understand how this is going. And so I guess that's where, my opponent and I do differ is I think the responsible way of legislating the recreational marijuana is a mold and a pattern we need to watch and then maybe apply down the road. Right now, there's no way we're ready for it, but we are losing the war and we need to think outside the box and have some new ideas to approach and find a real solution.
Okay. Marcus, from your perspective as the chief, from a perspective as the chief law enforcement officer in the district, what can be done to decrease the rates of DUIs from alcohol?
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. My approach to all resolutions socially and in this community are educate, empower. If you can educate our youth, if we can empower our youth, if we can find the resources necessary, families that have dealt with alcoholism for generations in this community understand you can't just incarcerate yourself out of this. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked for any of our families. And so we educate, we empower, and we resource. And I'm going to draw back. I'm going to come. It's going to become circular for the next 20 minutes. A lot of my answers are going to be: we need to find outside resources. We need to find funding. We need to find programs that address our multi-generational problems in a different way. Because if drinking and driving was a problem 50, 60, 70 years ago, 20 years ago, it still is today. And we can't incarcerate ourselves out of that problem. It's a proven loser. And so, again, we need to educate, empower, and resource our way out of this.
Thank you. Paul, what's your perspective on it?
Well, I'm a firm believer of treatment, of course. I think anytime you can heal somebody or anytime you can educate somebody and keep them from reoffending, it's all about public safety. Because when you're talking about DWI, it's that person who made a decision in a car. The other people on the road didn't make that same decision. So while on one side, I do believe that programs to treat alcoholism should stay in place and that we should always try and push forward that. On the other side, on behalf of the victims, of the innocent people, all the other people on the road, enforcement. We can't stop doing that.
So, Paul, how much of the job of a district attorney should be administrative or working with legislature, and how much of that job should be spent personally trying cases?
Well, and I'm glad you asked that question, but here's the thing. When it comes to being involved with the legislator, the district attorney doesn't go in there and make laws. We enforce the law. We're part of the executive branch of government. We're not part of the legislative branch of government. So it's good to support your legislators and try to push towards laws that would keep our community safe. But I would leave legislating laws to the legislators. I think it's important, and I don't think that you have seen in this district a district attorney for the last, I don't know, 30 years, 20 years, I'll go 20 years, prosecute cases. I'm a working prosecutor. That means I think it's important for the district attorney to keep his sword sharp. I think it's important that the district attorney not only be seated in an administrative behind a desk, because you're going to stay stuck in Taos the whole time. And this is a district that has 3 counties. We have Colfax and we have Union County. And I think our DA, if you're going to expect our prosecutors to build strong cases, to go into battle with their sword sharp, you better be able to lead that force. And so it's very important that our district attorney be involved and lead a team like that. Because you're going to hear excuses all the time. Well, we had too many cases and our prosecutors are overworked. Well, you have one more person in that office who's not trying a case. I won't be that person.
Okay.
Thank you.
Marcus.
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. I couldn't disagree anymore. I disagree entirely. District attorneys and the New Mexico District Attorneys Association and the National District Attorneys Association, both of which I am a member of, we do indeed get involved with fashioning and crafting legislation. These legislators are not experts in every realm of legislation that they're drafting. They're not all medical doctors. They're not economists. They're not prosecutors. They lean on those who are experts in that field. And so when we go to these subcommittee hearings, we need to be heard. Public safety, right? So when we were talking earlier about this state and national climate of criminal justice reform, sentencing reform, prison reform, if we just leave it to them, right, what safeguards do we have for our community members? For example, today, the Supreme Court just denied the ACLU and the Law Office of the Public Defender's petition to mass release classes of prisoners. John Sugg, our DA, one of the remarkable DAs that we have, argued in front of the Supreme Court on that legislation. So the Supreme Court here. So to think that we're powerless or that we're impotent or that we have no say-so is incredibly naive. We are the experts in this criminal justice field, and we need to inform our legislators about that. Now, there is a fine balance, and I think that a district attorney should be trying cases, and he does need to be prepared. And we do need to be on spot for our legal arguments and for fashioning trial preparedness. But a career prosecutor in the New Mexico District Attorneys Association told me when I took over, right, because Donald Gallegos was a prosecuting attorney. For his first 12, 15 years, he handled dozens if not hundreds of cases and took them to trial, right? But this words of wisdom came to me and said, you have 9 attorneys in that office who can do their job, but not a single one of them is qualified or even allowed to do the job you need to do. And that job is finding funding, speaking with legislators, crafting and fashioning law, speaking with the national delegation, reaching out to law enforcement to find holes. That way you secure your office's efficiency. If I'm in court, who's making sure that our lines of communication with all the victim advocacy groups is running smoothly? That's my job. I need to be accessible to the community 24/7, and I literally am. And so to think that all you should do is try, no, that's not the case at all. There's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. So Marcus, what do you feel are some of the biggest needs right now in the 8th district?
Money, right? Bottom line. Outside of that, it's getting on the right track. We have seen the previous administration get hammered in the media and by the governor and by the attorney general. And how do we resolve a lot of those issues? You do that by forging strong relationships with those who are investigating and putting together your cases. I know we've talked about this a lot, but that is the strength of in-court preparedness. Now, the violent felons, you got to prepare. They got to be segregated. The rest of them, we got to find a way to handle a lot of the on-the-ground issues that affect the families, that affect the children, And how do we do that? By bringing the victims and the witnesses in, making it a restorative justice, a holistic circle of resolution. And we do that by implementing new, improved ways of dealing with our social issues. And so our office, when we have a case come in, the carrot is let's resolve the underlying issues, right? Domestic violence is sometimes a symptom. And I've learned that through the mental and behavioral health experts in this community. That's not the problem, but we've got families who are dealing with the recession, depression, and that was, they didn't have money to get on before. They have sick children. They've got employment issues. They've got substance abuse issues. And domestic violence was just a symptom, not the underlying problem. Is it fair when we don't speak with the victims and the children in the family unit to say, all right, great, let's grab them, throw them in jail for 3 months, 6 months. Sorry, we don't know how you're going to, if it's a single family household, we don't, earner, we don't know how you're going to pay your rent. We don't know how you're going to buy your next meal. We're going to get you evicted. You're probably going to lose your car. Those aren't the answers. We've got to bring them in and say, okay, victims, okay, family unit, what do you need? What do you need to make this all better? And that's why a lot of these wonderful programs, we've got the criminal justice career pathways, the UNM Taos. It's a criminal justice career pathway that enables defendants, victims of these crimes, children of these criminal cases to get resources from UNM Taos. Educate, empower, resource driven. Those are the resolutions that we need.
Cool. Thank you. Paul.
Okay, Darren, and correct me if I'm wrong. Your question was about the major challenges, or?
No. What are the largest needs in the 8th Judicial District right now? And it was a question from Sheriff Jerry.
Well, I think as far as the district attorney's office is concerned, I think it's about crime, and I'll say it again, it's about crime right here where we live. So the major needs are building those alliances with law enforcement, in being active in these investigations from the very beginning, and making sure that public safety is a priority for the district attorney's office right here where we live. Now, I've looked at the FBI uniform crime report. It's something that they do, and they've done that for our district, the 8th Judicial District, and it supports exactly what I'm saying right here. It's about building strong cases. It's about building those alliances to keep our community safe. In the last tabulated year, we've had 118 violent crimes in this district. Now, they identify those as murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault. 60 of those were right here in Taos County. And that's just violent crime. And in Taos County alone, we've had 575 victims of property crime. That's burglary, theft, larceny, and vehicle theft. 180 of those were home invasions. So that means we're having our people violated and become victims of those types of crime every single day. I mean, we're talking about domestic violence. We need to help these victims. We need to be in touch. We need to prosecute the crimes that are in place, not change them to something else. If you look at that study, and this is factual information in the last tabulated year, they did a study on domestic violence or crimes against women and children. I'll narrow it down to that. 1,628 domestic violence crisis calls. 389 of those were adults, and 56 children who identified themselves as victims. You know how many were actually prosecuted? 26. Now, tell me, there's not a greater need than crime right here.
Okay. Paul, I mean, how many cases can logistically be tried with a staff of 9 attorneys across 3 counties?
Well, I mean, that's why we have the rules in place in the statute. It's not something, I mean, it's a process that comes into play. That's why I keep talking about building cases from the beginning, building them strong, because those are, you have to follow what the court's capabilities are, their dockets are, but you build strong cases, and you build them strong so that you're prepared for a trial, so that you're not forced into a weak plea offer. So this is what happens. Not all cases are tried. In fact, very few of them actually go to trial. So when you know that fact, then it kind of relieves the pressure a little bit. But when you build a strong case, you're not forced into a plea offer. You can actually negotiate that case and get justice without going to trial. You can have 100 cases. You build those cases strong. Guess what? You're going to reach a negotiation. What a plea offer should really be. You're going to, both sides are going to get the benefit of the bargain. Our community is going to be safer for it. And it's not going to be only the defendant getting the benefit of the bargain. So
Okay.
not all cases go, but you build them strong.
Thank you. Marcus.
I think your question was logistically how many can go to trial. The general answer is, without a hard number, as often as we need to, right? Logistically, we got 9 attorneys. We've got about 1,200 to 1,500 cases at any given time. If you want to give every attorney probably every 2 weeks that they're going to be in trial, that's 9 times 27, right? Maybe 200 trials a year. So that's logistically. If you were pedal to the metal and defense bar was not reasonable, your cases were weak, let me tell you what happens. When your case is weak, those are the cases that go to trial. You think defense is going to take a plea bargain when your case is weak? No, they're going to take you to trial. So that's why I say you got to go as often as you need to. The weak cases don't end up in pleas. Our strong cases definitely end up in pleas. Now you got to know where to fight, right? With life sentence, murder, rape, a lot of first-degree felonies, those are the ones where you just have to fight it out, right? The defendant's not going to accept a life sentence. And those are what we've done. That was part of 2 criminal murder and 1 convictions over the last 2 years. Career prosecutors sometimes don't even get in the courtroom for those. And we were able to successfully prosecute and convict on 2 of them. We got life sentences. And so you got to be ready to go to trial when they present themselves. However, you got to know when to fight and how to fight, right? So if your case is strong, you go to the defense bar, and you got to be reasonable, because they're not going to accept the full extent of the plea bargain if you're going to convict. If my conviction is going to end up in 12 years of prison time, you can't go to them and say, give me 12 years of prison time in our plea agreement. They're going to say, that's what I'm going to get at trial anyway. So let's just go to trial, right? So it's a matter of being held accountable, right? For all the lesser degree felonies, are they willing to take accountability for what they've done? Are they willing to accept a reasonable sentence for what they've done? And if they are, we'll plea it out. If they're not, then we end up in trial. But defense takes 1 case to trial every time, the one that can be proven up, right? We take to trial the murder ones, the felony, first felony, second-degree felonies. Those are the ones, because we're not willing to walk back and offer a lenient plea. Right? But everyone else, you got to be reasonable. You got to understand 94% of cases state and nationwide don't go to trial because it would literally lock up the judicial system. So it's unrealistic to think otherwise. Academics, experts, they know this. That's why you got to be reasonable and you got to understand how and when and why. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Switching gears a little bit. Marcus, what is your favorite Supreme Court case and why?
That's a good question. Wasn't prepared for that one. Got to think on that. I don't want to pass. Yeah, in this industry, it's got to be Miranda, right? Arizona. And that allows us, that set the precedent for ever since moving forward, the legality of search and seizure. And we're still adhering to it today. That was monumental. That was a touchstone of what we do on a daily basis on the streets and in the courtroom. Miranda, some more evidence than anything else gets suppressed and excluded because of search and seizure. That's why we got to be very caught up. We got to be prepared, and we got to know what is Miranda, how does it operate, and what are the implications involved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Paul.
Darien, and don't call me a copycatter, but I really do think Miranda is also my favorite case. And the reason that is because it creates that checks and balances within our government, within our police officers. It helps our police officers to deal with the public in a more favorable, but while being aggressive. Now, the way Miranda falls into place here is in order to require Miranda, a person there has to be two things. There has to be custody and interrogation. So police officers, a well-trained police officer knows these things, and they can do their investigation. They use Miranda in a certain way. And when those two things are present, well, then you have Miranda, and you have to Mirandize somebody. But it's an effective tool. It helps police officers investigate crimes, and it's something that it doesn't only hold police officers accountable. I think in a case that has really affected our community nationwide. When I talk about custody and interrogation, if we expect our police officers to know that, then we have to have our attorneys know that same case. We have to know exactly what custody is, and we have to know what interrogation is. So when I'm talking about the Amalia case, so we blew it because custody was present and we missed a hearing. So that's my favorite case for those reasons.
Okay. Paul, what is your favorite legal drama?
You're talking about TV?
Yeah.
Law and Order.
All right, Marcus.
And well, let me explain that one. And the reason I pick Law and Order is because when you're talking about the district attorney's office and you're talking about this alliance that I'm telling you and building strong cases, it's exactly the way it says it at the beginning. It's two different entities, the police who investigate crime and the district attorney's office who prosecutes the offenders. So it's based on good investigations. And let the police do their job, respect their job, and then take their investigation, help them with it, and then you have a strong case to prosecute. Thanks, Darren.
Okay. Thank you. Marcus.
Oh, okay. If I get as much time, I got a 1A, 1B.
All right.
1A, Boston Legal, because it is so intelligently written. Number 2, Suits, because it's sexy. And 3, Better Call Saul. The reason is, in one of their early first seasons, Saul is associating with some nefarious characters, and they take him out to the desert, and they're gonna whack him. And he says, "No, I'm an attorney. I promise." This is the most comedic one of them all. I'm an attorney. Ask me any legal question. Well, not a contracts question. So anyway, those are my 3. Thanks, Terry.
All right. So Marcus, if you could be any celebrity attorney.
Harvey Specter. I just told you it's the sexiest one, Darien. Harvey Specter from Suits. Thank you.
All right. Paul?
I'd be Matt Locke. He always got it right.
Okay. Thank you. I'll allow 1 minute each for closing remarks, and then we'll wrap this thing up tonight. Let's see. Paul will have the closing remarks since Marcus went first. So Marcus, you're up for your closing remarks, sir.
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. In closing, I want to assure this community that maintaining the integrity of this office is my promise. I will be held to the highest standard. I will engage in the tough conversations. I will make the tough decisions, and I will always build a consensus with those who are in the know. That's law enforcement. That's our judges. That's our defense bar. That's our community stakeholders, our victim advocacy groups, our victims, our witnesses, This is a comprehensive, never-ending job. You got to be available 24/7 in this position, which I'm happy to do. And I told the governor, I'm going to do this for a term, maybe two, Governor. And the reason is, in this industry, you probably burn as many bridges as you build, and that's just part of the game. And if I haven't accomplished what I hope to in 8 years, then it's time for someone else with fresh, new ideas to take my place. And if I have accomplished the mission, job well done. And now it's time for another fresh look at things. So that's exactly what we're going to do moving forward. And I can promise you that I'm going to work hard every day, and I'm going to continue to make sure that this public and this community is protected, and that we draw on all the resources, and that when I leave here, we're going to have so many more resources, programs, and assistance in solving our problems outside of the courtroom, not just in the courtroom. How else is this community going to come together? What can I do to foster new attorneys out of this community? Found the first ever mock trial teams in our high schools, nurture and cultivate those legal minds so that way they can come home. What's the broad picture resolution to this budget crisis? Find people like me and 3 other attorneys who grew up in Cimarron, Sierra Maria, and Taos to come back and work, because it's not bottom line. It's a service to your community. After graduation, I didn't go anywhere else. I knew I was coming directly here. I've turned down civil positions, more lucrative pay, to stay here and serve. Maybe down the road somewhere when I leave, we'll chase the money, but right now it's a matter of public service. And that is what I can promise to this community. And when my time is up, I don't need the voters to get me out of here. I'm leaving on my own. So I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. Chair Fernandez and Taos County Democratic Party, we appreciate your hard work and all that you do for the party. And I'm proud to be a member. You all take care. Have a great night. And remember, get out and vote.
Thank you. Paul?
Thank you, Darien. And first, I'd like to thank everybody who's watching, and I'm humbly asking for your vote. I think that having a district attorney's office that has experience and proven leadership is essential to public safety and keeping our community secure. I learned discipline as a member of the United States Marine Corps. I worked law enforcement from the ground up, from patrol officer to a lieutenant, and that's a command position. I prosecuted many cases. I got convictions in murder cases starting in Taos County and then coming over here to our district. So I learned how to handle cases and not just plea bargain them. But most of all, I grew up in this community. I grew up in Arroyo Hondo, and I grew up without the privilege of money or political connections, and I can't imagine any shortcuts. So humbly, I'm asking for your vote. Thank you, everybody.
Cool. And Paul and Marcus, I want to thank you both for taking the time to join us tonight and share your respective visions for the position. I want to thank you for keeping this civil and informative and on issues. And I personally learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did as well. And we're doing this online because we still have an election coming up, and we want people to be informed in a safe manner. And we ask that people continue to tune in. We're hosting forums for the various commission races as well, and the magistrate and district judge races that are contested, so that people can be informed. And we do ask that you vote. We ask that you vote safely. Request your absentee ballot. Go to nmvote.org or call our county clerk's office, 575-737-6400, and request your ballot today. It's safe, it's secure, and it allows democracy to continue and your voice to be heard. Again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Please vote and be safe. And Taos, we're in this together, and we'll get out of this together. Want to thank George Brown, our treasurer, for assisting with the technology tonight. I want to thank Annette Adiano, our secretary, for helping to get the word out. And I want to thank so many other volunteers who make these activities happen for the party. Thank you all very much. Have a great night. Take care.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.